Law on the Street, my brother, Attorney Brian Pritchett of the Pritchett Firm. Thank you for joining us. We usually do this on Mondays.
Right.
We're now moving it to Wednesdays at 8:36.
Wednesday nights, absolutely.
Absolutely. So let's start off. We do want to start off with Lindsey Graham and Mark Meadows.
Yes. The biggest two names that have been linked to the January 6th grand jury that is in Fulton County right now. The Fulton County DA has requested that they appear to testify in front of the grand jury. She convened it over the influencing of the voting that happened with Brad Raffensperger from January, from the election when the president allegedly called him and pressured him to find the votes. Although we do have a recording of the phone call, Mark Meadows was instrumental in setting up that phone call. He also attended and boasted about a meeting he had in the Oval Office about Georgia and finding those votes. So the DA wants his testimony in front of the grand jury to see if there was some sort of criminal influence, criminal interference in the Georgia election that was certified for Joe Biden. So he said, I don't want to appear. I don't want to do it. He lives in South Carolina, which is where he represented them for, I believe, 6 terms in Congress. And funny thing, I saw that he's actually got a mailing address for a mobile home in North Carolina, but he lives in South Carolina. So the DA used the long arm statute properly, gave several
What's
dates.
the long arm statute?
That is something that allows you to go outside of your jurisdiction to subpoena somebody to appear. And it's not an easy thing to do. You've got to go through a lot of special steps to make sure you perfect that subpoena. And the judge in South Carolina said that they had, and it was not going to be an inconvenience to Mr. Meadows to appear. They gave him several dates in November for his testimony. And this is not like a recorded deposition. This is testimony in front of a grand jury, which is more of a fact-finding body. It's a larger group of people. It's not a jury that's not going to convict anybody, but it is under oath. It is testimony that's used to see if there are going to be charges filed from, if they're going to give you a true bill or a no bill at the end of the investigation.
But so when you call in a Mark Meadows and a Lindsey Graham,
right?
Can a grand jury say, oh, that guy did something wrong, even though you were going after someone else, Donald Trump, from the beginning?
Absolutely. And that's usually what the argument is that these people might be trying to avoid. Like, I don't want to talk about this. Now, you can take the Fifth Amendment, which, again, cannot be held against you in a court of law if it's a criminal case. If it's a civil case, it can be held against you. This is a criminal investigation. And
what is the crime here? That's my question. What is this? She convened the grand jury, right? So you have to present to the grand jury, hey, I'm investigating this crime. What is the crime that she's investigating?
Interference of an election, which is a protected thing that we have on the books. We want our elections to be above reproach. And that's why we are very we're careful now after what has been alleged the last few elections. So when it goes both ways. If you're trying to influence or tell somebody to find the votes when there are no votes to find, that could be seen as an interference, a criminal act of trying to influence the election in a way. And
so that becomes a crime even though the person you're talking to did nothing.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, the request for it
is the crime.
You get into conspiracy ideas, RICO charges, where you have 2 or more people who want to get together and come up with a criminal plan, and they has to have an overt act to try to orchestrate that plan. The overt act is calling Brad Raffensperger and saying, find the votes.
Gotcha. And then everyone that was involved in that call talked in that call becomes, so as a lawyer, let me ask you this. And I'm taking myself out of it as conservative, Trump guy, all that. I'm taking all of that out of it. Does this seem heavy-handed to you? We listen to Brandon Straka with what he went through. We see with Mark Meadows, Lindsey Graham, all the people they've called. They're trying to get Trump down here. Is this heavy-handed for something that did not ever come to fruition?
Not at all. Because a law is a law. And if you violate that law, you have to be brought to justice for doing something wrong. Let's let them come and testify. Let's see what happened. Then if the grand jury, which is a apolitical body, if they find nothing was done wrong, they'll issue a no bill and there's no charge, right? Let's do the investigation. They're stonewalling the investigation just to get that answer. Now, there might not be anything to it. We don't know. Now, I've also heard the law school joke, you could indict a ham sandwich in a grand jury. When I first started out of law school, I did some prosecution work, and there were grand juries involved, and it was pretty easy to get the charge that you wanted to have filed. But this is not a simple grand jury. This is a very important grand jury, and they're trying to figure out if the president of the United States at the time used undue influence to try to change an election.
Well, we're in the studio with attorney Brian Pritchett of the Pritchett firm, and this is a segment called Law on the Street. Tell people how they can reach you real quick before we go into our next story.
PritchettFirmPC.com. Phone number of the office is 404-962-0010. I like to say 0010. Makes me sound like a spy or something. So 404-962-0010.
0010. That's 0010, ladies and gentlemen. Brandon Straka, you heard his story.
Yes.
Do you think does he have a case, or do you see what he said as being political?
I see the lawsuits that have been filed against him as potentially political because the man doesn't have any assets right now to go against, right? He got caught up in I think he said the word mob, and that might be a better way to put it versus how some people are trying to describe it as
insurrection.
Well, insurrection, see, there were people there who were trying to create an insurrection.
Right.
There were people there who were just there because they thought they had to be there. And there are people there like Brandon who was there to take video of it. Now, some of his tweets that had been produced and were shown as evidence at his trial and at his plea hearing were pretty inflammatory.
But there's still tweets.
There's still tweets.
They're just words, right?
You have the First Amendment right to say what you want, and as long as it's not shouting fire in a crowded movie theater, then you should be okay. But he did set foot on protected land that was trespassing, and that is, and the reason they got him was because he videoed it.
Right.
So that's what he did. I mean, he did do that crime per se, and that's why he pled guilty to it. No, he never set foot into the Capitol. He claimed he did not know about the violence happening, and that you've got to believe him at his word. But
I heard from a lot of people that were up there. They had no clue what was going on inside the outside the Capitol. People clamming scaffolding and stuff like that. What I want to ask you this, as a lawyer, right? When January 6th first happened, one of the questions we talked about on the show, because I'm African American, Melania Kai is African American, and at them past our call screener, Scotty B, was African American. One of the things that we all agreed upon that next day after January 6th was if that were a group of African Americans, there would have been a gunfight. It would have been a slaughter of gunfire killing people. That's what we had said.
Right.
And many in the African American community believe that. Let's assume these are all African Americans and everything went the same way. Would we not be screaming racism for a Brandon Straka if he's black, or some of the others that did not participate in violence but being in jail for a year and a half with no charges, no court dates? Would we kind of look at that as racism and the system being unfair?
That's a really difficult hypothetical because a lot of them would be dead.
So you agree with our initial statement, yeah?
Black Lives Matter. Doesn't matter what the situation is. Black Lives Matter, and if that had happened there, we would have seen a lot of people dying. And
Gotcha.
I think there was racism there because some of those people that entered the Capitol were treated rather gently for what had happened. If you look at the video of what happened inside the Capitol, the fact that people were attacked and there was, that one woman who died, a lot of stuff happened inside that people outside didn't know about. I get that. That happens anytime you go somewhere and a mob breaks out or an insurrection starts. People were there to do something really dastardly, and it didn't work, right? Democracy won.
Right.
I'll use air quotes on democracy, but it did win. The election was certified. Joe Biden's the president. But if that had been a group of African Americans there, then we would have had something worse than imaginable happen beyond the insurrection itself. There have been a lot of people dead.
Fair enough, my man. We got to make this. Greg P., what do you think? We need to have Law on the Street maybe twice a week?
I enjoy it because there's so much pushback to some of Shelley's ideals sometimes.
Right.
I enjoy it.
That's why I like it.
Because as soon as you brought up the difference of Black Lives Matter, I'm thinking, oh, we're having the Boston Massacre Part 2. That's what's going to happen.
But that's what we said. But that's what I started off by saying. Me, Melania Kai, and Scotty B said that would happen. But let's assume it doesn't happen. But I think the most powerful thing you said, the racism was in the reaction to the people going into the Capitol.
Correct.
What's our next story we're talking about?
Wow, there's a lot. Well, New York City. Well, we can talk about Lindsey Graham and his Hail Mary to Clarence Thomas to get out of testifying at the grand jury. That was something that was not mentioned.
Greg brought up that more liberal-leaning legal experts are saying that this is an impeachable offense by Clarence Thomas. Have you heard that?
I don't really want to give you my opinion on Clarence Thomas. I can tell you objectively that he has overstepped so many times. This is just another example of him overstepping legally to stop something that should happen, because Lindsey Graham and Mark Meadows cannot declare executive privilege to anything they know about. Executive privilege does not extend to those gentlemen. Lindsey Graham was not calling as part of his senatorial duties to talk to Brad Raffensperger.
Right.
He was part of that conspiracy, allegedly part of that conspiracy to try to influence the results in Georgia. That's what Lindsey Graham was doing. And he doesn't want to be brought in front of the grand jury about that. I understand that, because I would not want to testify in front of the grand jury. So I get where he's coming from, but to have Clarence Thomas come in at the 11th hour and issue that stay.
So you're saying because I've always heard Clarence Thomas was so quiet, he never asked a question. You know, the New York Times wrote a long piece about because he doesn't ask questions, he's not really bright. Now you're saying he's overstepped his bounds a lot of times.
Yes, he does a lot of things because the Supreme Court justices have power over the people in their circuits. There are, the 9 justices that each have a part of the country, and this is, we're under Clarence Thomas's, section. There's probably a better word for it, but that was 20-something years ago. Yeah, and so Lindsey reached out to his quote-unquote justice, who might be on his speed dial. I don't know, because Clarence is one of those gentlemen, one of those Supreme Court justices who, like you said, is a chameleon over the years. You don't know what he's thinking. You don't understand his questions because he doesn't ask a lot. But his decisions have always been well-written and well-researched and hard to go against, but they've always been very right-leaning, very conservative.
Right, of course.
So that's who he is. I've not heard anyone claim that he's not a smart person. I just think he sometimes goes a little too far, like in this case.
Yeah, gotcha. And do you think that Lindsey Graham was smart to reach out to him and use that relationship? I mean, because that's what this country kind of is built on, right?
I mean, why not call your friend and, hey, can you help me out here, buddy?
Right.
I mean, we've all got friends like that, right?
Right. I wish I had more.
Don't ask any questions. Bring 2 shovels and a gallon of water, and I'll tell you when you get here.
When you get here. And don't worry about the rolled up rug in the darkness.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. It's a little heavier than a rug.
Right. How can people reach you, my friend, Attorney Brian Pritchett of the Pritchett Firm? This was probably our best conversation. Let's do this more often. This was a great conversation, my brother.
Sounds good. Sounds good, my friend. PritchettFirmPC.com, 404-962-0010. Give me a call, send me a text, go on the website, send me an email.
Say it one more time.
PritchettFirmPC.com, 404-962-0010.
My man. It's Law on the Street every Wednesday now, starting every Wednesday at 8:36. We got more to come. Pfizer. Guess how much Pfizer is going to mark up the vaccine? Also, Jon Stewart admitted to something. Years too late, but it's still a lefty admitting to something. It's Word on the Street, the hottest party on talk radio.
Johnny, he gonna beat the case, beat it up like Johnny Cock.